This is Chicago's Morning Answer with Dan Proft and Amy Jacobson on AM 560. The Answer.
Good morning, Dan and Amy and Tom Perez, potty-mouthed DNC chairman, says bigotry is on the ballot on Tuesday. And I would argue so is bigot baiting. And let me present one example from Don Lemon, who has now the undisputed dumbest man on television after this performance with Chris Cuomo as his captive audience.
Any one group or any one ethnicity, but we keep thinking that the biggest terror threat is something else. Some people who are marching, towards the border like it's imminent. And when the last time they did this, a couple hundred people came, and they, most of them did get into the country. Most of them got tuckered out before they even made it to the border. So we have to stop demonizing people and realize the biggest terror threat in this country is white men, most of them radicalized to the right. And we have to start doing something about them. There is no travel ban on them. There is no ban on, they had the Muslim ban. There is no white guy ban. Mm-hmm. So what do we do about that?
Yeah, boy, big question from Don Lemon, the problem of white men, radicalized white men. He's talking in the context of the violence, both the synagogue shooting as well as the bombs that were sent to Democrats and CNN. Just a point of order, Orlando nightclub, Boston Marathon, San Bernardino. There have been also hateful and in some cases deranged white guys who've murdered people, no question. Don Lemon thinks we need to have a conversation about travel bans for white guys and maybe a ban on white guys?
I don't know.
Maybe
I'll call him later today and ask him what he meant.
Forced deportation, maybe? Internment camps? What does he have in mind? Just be interesting. Boy, this comes on the heels of Julie Eihoff over at GQ saying that Trump has radicalized more people than ISIS. So this is the bigotry on the ballot on Tuesday that Tom Perez is talking about. We talked about this earlier in the week. Our friend Bob Woodson, founder and president of the Woodson Center, was on with Tucker Carlson talking about our civility and cohesion and harmony after Sunday's this weekend, Saturday's horrific shooting. And he made some interesting comparisons to the civil rights movement, his experience in the civil rights movement that provide perhaps lessons for today. So I wanted to have him on to develop some of those lessons, see if we can provide some enlightenment rather than just the typical race-hustling demagoguery. For more, we're pleased to be joined by the aforesaid Bob Woodson, a fellow cigar aficionado, I'm happy to say. Bob, thanks for joining us. Appreciate it.
Thanks for the cigars.
No problem. My pleasure.
Cigars?
I turned him on to the Leaf by Oscar.
Oh,
yeah,
okay.
Yeah, it's the way to go. I'm telling you, nice Honduran wrap there. Bob, start with Don Lemon's comments about, we got to do something about these white guys.
Well, it shows you the moral inconsistency and the hypocrisy of people on that side. Because if a white person had said that about a black man, it would be outrage. But we tolerate bigotry on the left, particularly bigotry coming from a Don Lemon. And so it just shows you the absolute absurdity and the moral inconsistency of what we're facing today. And even charges of racism, it's almost lost its meaning because it's been just overutilized and demonized. It's just been crazy.
But do you think Don Lemon really means it, or is he just trying to be provocative?
No, I think Don Lemon at some level means it. It's hard to say. I don't really care whether he means it or not. I don't challenge anyone's motivations, but I do challenge their behavior. And I think he should be fired for it.
Wow.
I really think Don Lemon, it's time for him to be fired for that. We must return to a level playing field in terms of moral consistency, where we hold everybody to a common standard. As I said in the Tucker Carlson show, as a veteran of the civil rights movement, our demand was for the rules to apply evenly. And in pursuing justice, we also recognize that there are different paths to pursuing justice. And so, as I said, that the civil rights movement did not speak with a single voice. It fractured because it fractured into different organizations, SNCC, SCLC, Southern Leadership, and everything. And what happened that it fractured, but we didn't fracture and therefore develop warring camps. What we did was we were civil in our debate. So the civil rights movement was advanced as much by the quality of its debate as to the way forward as it was anything else.
You sort of divided up the labor to some extent. Different people took different paths to get to the same place.
Yes, but we also never demonized even people who we regarded as our opponents. We never saw them as enemies. There are all kinds of examples of grace in action. The fact that King could stand outside of a bombed home with his wife next to him who barely escaped. He was surrounded by 200 armed black men, and he counseled peace with them. And there are several instances like that. So there are some lessons in the civil rights. If King and others of my generation could counsel peace when a home of our leader was bombed, certainly we can proceed with civil discourse today to confront our problems that we have.
Well, that's part of what I wanted to talk to you about too, is the calls in the wake of horrific events like what happened at that Pittsburgh synagogue to have more law enforcement monitoring of social media, to have to criminalize speech, to criminalize thoughts that are translated into speech. And I just want to get your perspective, because I can only imagine the vile things that were said to you and about you and your brethren. And obviously you just mentioned an example of the vile, horrific things that were done. And the idea of constricting speech or trying to have some state definition of what is acceptable speech and not acceptable speech, new definition in the context of violence or uncivil discourse?
Well, first of all, I'm going to join some lessons from the civil rights movement. America didn't change just because we signed Emancipation Proclamation and the Voting Rights Bill. The hearts of Americans changed. The white people changed. Black people changed. And it was more of a cultural revolution than it was a legal one. And that's because, as King and others, we fought to recruit people to these principles. And it was successful. And so, but I don't think we can accomplish it by externals. There is a deep crisis in the American culture that is adversely affecting people of all races. The opioid epidemic that is killing more young people today, black and white, that are being killed in auto accidents. We have a suicide rate in Palo Alto, California, in Silicon Valley, among affluent white teenagers that is 6 times the national average. And so we have some deep seated cultural problems that is fueling a lot of the tribalism. And the way you solve that problem isn't by passing more laws or policies. We've got to begin to suck the oxygen out of it by providing answers and cures. And as I said, the 3,000 grassroots leaders that I serve in 39 states have demonstrated by their actions and experience that they can help people to find meaning and content and spiritual centeredness to their lives. And so therefore, what we're trying to do is unleash them so that they can begin to move among the American population and help people to understand that it is brokenness in their lives that is fueling their frustration, and that we know people who have triumphed over this brokenness We just need the opportunity to let this spread the way hatred is being promoted.
Well, in Chicago, we have everybody's focused on Tuesday, but we've got a mayor's race that comes up right after the first of the year. And as you know, Chicago is about a third, and a third, white, black, and Latino, rough numbers. And I know a significant part of your life's work is trying to advance the interests of people in the barrio and the ghetto and the trailer park, to use a handle. So poor whites, blacks, Latinos, doesn't matter your race or background, just frankly poor people, to extend to them opportunities that their predecessors haven't had. And I wonder how you suggest we think about that or talk about that. I know you characterize yourself as a solutionist. So how would you advise Chicago, people like us, to frame the discussion for a mayor's race where you've got a bunch of, here's the group of black candidates for the black community. Here's the group of Latino candidates for the Latino community. Here's the group of white candidates for the Irish. That's how it is covered by the media. How can we improve that discussion?
Well, first of all, it's not going to be solved through politics. It doesn't matter. I mean, the black community has been served over the last 50 years, and all of the major urban centers, black liberal Democrats have been in power. The mayor's office, city hall, the school boards, all of them. And they are the most deteriorating places around. That's where all your black-on-black crime is coming from. So it is not the race or sex of the ruler that determines winners and losers in these places. It is the content of the strategies that they employ to solve problems. But as long as we define the problem as having the right color leader and not, I use it like it's like having a car with 4 flat tires, and you argue over the race of the driver.
Yeah.
Right.
And that's what we're doing. We're arguing over the race of the driver when the real problem is fixing the 4 flat tires. And we have examples around the country where when you go into the black community where the problem is and recruit healing agents from within that community, give them the resources that they need, give them the opportunity to recruit people to responsibility, major change can occur. If the problem were really race, the challenges between 1930 and 1940, when the country was in a deep depression, when the unemployment rate was 40% in the black community, 25% in the white community, when racism was enshrined in law, elderly people could walk in black neighborhoods in Chicago without fear of being assaulted by their grandchildren. So if racism were the culprit, then why didn't we go to hell in a handbasket then? Mm. So we need to look back at what are the lessons that we can learn from the past. And if you look at the lessons, it's because between 1930 and 1940, during the Depression, it was a cultural renaissance there. Our marriage rate was higher than any other group in the country. The religious institutions that was the glue that held us together. And so we need to go back and revisit the past and apply the old values to a new vision of what it could become. I can take you to areas of cities that were overrun with violence, where we haven't seen a gang incident in 12 years. There were 53 gang murders in one of my communities here in Washington, D.C., called Benning Terrace. PBS did a special. There were 53 murders in the 5 square block area in 2 years. We trained 5 grassroots leaders, ex-offenders, who go in as healing agents. And they brought these young people, just 16 of them, to my office, and we negotiated a gang truce. But we also fed into that community, let these young people rebuild the community they were destroying. And as a consequence, for 12 years, we didn't have a single gang-related murder. So the models are there. It's just that we don't look to the community suffering the problem for the solution. We keep looking for a race remedy. We keep looking for a political remedy. And that is, as I said, like trying to change the race of the driver in a car that has 4 flat tires.
Bob Woodson, the wisdom of Bob Woodson, founder and president of the Woodson Center. We could use a big outpost here in Chicago. Bob, thanks so much for joining us as always. Appreciate it.
Thank you.
And he joined us on our turnkey.pro answer line.
Listen to Dan and Amy on your smartphone. Download the AM 560 mobile app today at 560theanswer.com/mobile.